So after the conflicts of interest allegations against Toto and Suzie Wolff and the investigation that followed, which was then dropped, I'm left thinking, what will the whole aftermath look like? And who will be the biggest losers out of this whole thing? Now, for there to be losers, you have to have winners, and you could argue that F1 and Toto and Suzie Wolff came out winners from this whole thing, and thinking short term, yeah, that's probably right. And regarding the FIA, we're left thinking if they were certain that there might have been a breach in the rules, why wasn't it handled in a more private way, and why was the investigation also dropped so suddenly? Also in disgust from this whole thing, we saw Lewis Hamilton leave behind his third place trophy at the recent FIA Gala as a sort of statement after expressing his disappointment towards the FIA and a lack of diversity in the sport. Some are calling this a symbolic gesture, some are calling it ungrateful, but what do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments. But the immediate losers from this whole thing are the FIA and Mohammed bin Sulayem, who are now going to be the targets of Mercedes lawyers in what Toto Wolff has called an active legal exchange, because the damage has already been done to the individuals and the reputations of F1 and also the FIA. And as the dust is still settling with the true damage still to be revealed and also approaching the 2024 season, I think we will still experience some fallout from this in the coming year. So in the long term, I think we might be in a scenario now where everybody loses to some degree. And I hate to say this because once again, F1 is in the news for the wrong reasons, and for a matter which could have been handled a lot more delicately and carefully. It's actually amazing that situations like this at the FIA are handled in a act now, ask questions later method. Not what you should expect from a sport at this level, really. Now, credit to them, the 9 other F1 teams came together and displayed a united front to the FIA, all releasing the same statement saying that they had not made any complaint to the FIA regarding the allegations and that they had support for the F1 Academy, etc, etc. And I'm not sure that the FIA were expecting this show of solidarity from the F1 teams, because normally they're all climbing over each other to try and get any form of advantage. And also, they're not normally in the habit of protecting one another or sticking up for each other. You know, when you have a situation where Christian Horner is prepared to fight in Toto Wolff's corner against something that you've said, yeah, that's when you know you've really screwed up. The FIA has always kept the teams in check with a sort of divide and conquer method, getting them all into a position where they would be happy to snitch on each other if necessary. But when you consider that, how badly is the FIA being run today when all 10 teams are quite happily willing to stand with each other? A healthy and powerful FIA means a divided and bickering F1 grid. However, given the recent developments, does this mean that the FIA are now losing their grip on the situation? Are the teams and the individuals part of these teams becoming too powerful in their eyes? Which then leads us to how this whole thing came out. Because if there's one thing that's alive and well in F1 right now, it is politics. Now, the FIA's claim is that they were informed of a sharing of confidential information and a conflict of interest. Now, the exact source of this information is unclear, and whilst it may or may not come to light, we cannot disregard that it might have been entirely fabricated by the FIA themselves, you know, to create some instability and disarray amongst the teams. But flipping this around, we also can't disregard the possibility that although the teams released this unified statement denying any knowledge of wrongdoings, somebody might be fibbing and telling lies. It's just that in my eyes, and I'd be keen to hear what you guys think on this as well, all the teams coming together like that in unison is a bit unusual. And the last time solidarity like that was shown on that level was back in 2009 with the FOTA FIA battle. And whilst on the face of it, it might warm the heart a little bit to see all the teams united together against the evil FIA, it does seem a bit like something is off here. Now, to be honest, I'm more on the side of the teams and F1 itself, but I do recognise that FIA does do a very important job. We also have to get real here and recognise that F1 teams do not always tell the truth. The list is very, very long. You had Spygate, then you had Crashgate, and then you have teams claiming that their car is legal when they know full well that it isn't. You also had the pink Mercedes when there was clear that something else was at play there. Software in the 1994 Benetton, additional fuel tanks in the 2005 BAR, Tyrrell filling their tanks with water and lead shot in 1984. In all of these situations, if you had accused the team principal of any wrongdoing, they would initially deny it in any of those scenarios. Mr. Briatore, did you make Nelson Piquet crash on purpose in order to bring out the safety car? No. Mr. Stephanie, have you been using illegal documents from Ferrari? No, I haven't. Honestly, there are tons of situations like this where something has been initially denied only for them to be proven guilty later on. And how many times have Toto Wolff and Christian Horner accused each other of all sorts of things like lying and dodgy dealings and just generally knowing things that they shouldn't? Just because Toto Wolff has scary lawyers and printouts and emails doesn't mean he's right. Just because you're the loudest voice doesn't mean you're right. This is why I think there's a lot more to come from this, and the truth will unfold as the 2024 season goes on. To be honest, if you came to me and said, guess which team principal has been accused of knowing things he shouldn't and also a conflict of interest, and I only had one guess and I would win 100 quid if I was right, yeah, I would probably go with Toto Wolff. Because whilst it looks like he is innocent in this situation, it by no means clears him up of potential conflicts of interest in other areas, especially when we saw how he reacted in Las Vegas with that whole drain cover fiasco. I'm not trying to single out Toto Wolff here, but we have to remember that he is a very good team principal, but he is also a very successful businessman as well, and he knows what he's doing and talking about. It's a bit of a weird reference, but Gordon Gekko said in Wall Street that the most valuable commodity is information, and this rings true especially with Formula One. But let's circle back to the teams all releasing the same statement, pretty much saying the same thing. And whilst this is very admirable, I do wonder if all the teams are in on this and they all know things that they shouldn't be knowing, and also that they all have dirt on each other. And if this is true, is it a case of mutually assured destruction amongst the teams, where if one gets called out and proven guilty against allegations such as this, they all speak up and they all go? Potentially, this could mean the implosion of F1 itself, and who's to say that the teams know this and have each other's backs to prevent this from happening? And with F1 and motorsport being such a small community with staff and individuals and businesses moving around all the time, it's almost certain that little tiny tidbits of information find their way into places through staff members that they shouldn't, and it's just something that is just impossible to police. And in the situation with the Wolves, if Toto says, "How was your day?" when Susie comes home, or vice versa when Toto comes home, and they say, this, that, and the other, they unfortunately run the risk of saying something that they shouldn't, especially in times of stress or high emotion or something like that. It's all new ground for F1 to consider, and it's just a case of getting to know this kind of situation. In regards to the aftermath, I'm quite happy that this whole thing has been dropped and won't go any further for the time being, because this sort of thing is just not what F1 needs right now, especially as it's trying to expand and grow and support the F1 Academy and increase the chances of seeing a female in F1 in the near future. Now, there have been women racing in F1 before, and I think that collectively F1 has forgotten this. But a really negative part of this whole thing is that for the time being anyway, Suzie Wolff and the F1 Academy has had their reputations damaged a little bit. And people might be keeping an eye on Susie and the F1 Academy, not for its potential and hope for success, but in case anything from the FIA investigation reveals itself, although it's been dropped. So whilst F1 has to realise that things like this may happen in the sport now, married couples who both work in Formula One or motorsport have to be honest and realise that it may draw unwanted suspicion or attention. It's not just F1 though. Imagine the grief a couple must get if the wife works for Disney and the husband works for Netflix. So yeah, F1 is just going to have to learn how to manage this sort of thing. So this now leaves us with the FIA, because from this whole saga, they have come out of the other side at a loss and definitely appearing to be weaker. And I just get the same feeling about Mohammed bin Sulayem. It's like he just doesn't have the influence and appears to be massively out of his depth. And also the unity of the teams now just indicates this further. And if the FIA are happy to investigate Toto Wolff, Mercedes and any other team, what would happen then if Toto or the teams called for an investigation into the FIA? The question is now, are the FIA now inadequate to handle modern F1? And does this add more to the discussion of a breakaway series or F1 simply governing itself? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And because F1 and the teams came out in such force, I find it suspicious that the FIA decided to drop the investigation so quickly. It was like it was over before it was started, but you could argue that the FIA was simply just fulfilling their duties and responsibilities by conducting an investigation where they thought there might have been some sort of wrongdoing, and then finding nothing, and then considering the matter closed. But the timing of this whole saga was quite convenient for them, considering all the channels and bureaucracy that something like this would have to go through in the FIA before it becomes an allegation and then an investigation. It might take weeks or even months. Think of all the different departments and legal teams something like this would have to go through before it is considered bulletproof, and then the FIA has a solid case. This is why I think the FIA learned of this whole thing months ago and then decided to action it after the season had ended, rather than during the season where team principals can meet over a race weekend and deal with it on the spot. Very conveniently timed by the FIA, I have to say. But long term here, I think that the whole universe of F1 here loses, and with this I'm talking about the FIA, F1 and Liberty Media. It just adds further suspicion of things like dodgy dealings, corruption, lies, all this sort of thing. Although now we do have to consider that it is the winter break, there isn't much news going on, and things get made bigger than they actually are. But I think we're still yet to see the full fallout from this, and Toto Wolff will be starting 2024 with an even bigger chip on his shoulder now. And when the F1 Academy season starts in March, it may not have that squeaky clean reputation that it was hoping for. And that's what this whole thing comes down to, is reputations. Because reputations have been damaged, and it will be interesting to see if this matter is totally forgotten about, or if it will affect things moving forward. We saw Lewis Hamilton show what he thought of this whole thing at the FIA Gala Ball, but it would also be interesting to see what other drivers think of this whole thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if the drivers, particularly the younger ones and ones who are yet to be established, are just going to keep their mouth shut and just get on with their job. I wonder what Sebastian Vettel would have to say about this whole thing if he was still racing. So yeah, let's just keep an eye on the news, see what happens. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share and subscribe. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments about this whole thing, because it is quite a key sort of thing. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers.